The rain had started before dawn, drumming against the rooftops of the old industrial district like a relentless heartbeat. By morning, the narrow alleys of Westbridge were slick with mud and oil, and most of the stray animals had vanished into hiding. Except for one, the German Shepherd moved through the streets with purpose. His coat, once a proud golden brown, was streaked with grime, and a faint limp marked his right hind leg. Yet his eyes, deep amber, alive with intelligence, never lost their focus. He wasn't wandering aimlessly like the others. He was searching. Locals had seen him before. Some called him Rex, others Shadow. No one knew where he'd come from, only that he'd been appearing around the same stretch of abandoned factories for months, sniffing, whining, digging, and returning day after day as if haunted by a memory he couldn't let go of. That morning, as thunder rolled in the distance, Rex stopped in front of an old warehouse long forgotten by time. Rust streaked the steel door, and half the windows were shattered, their jagged edges glittering like teeth. He sniffed the air, ears twitching. Beneath the scent of wet metal and mold, there was something else, something faint but human. He whined softly, tail low, and began pawing at the entrance. Inside, the warehouse was a cavern of shadows. The storm had knocked out power years ago, and only thin spears of light filtered through cracks in the roof. Dust floated like ghosts, and somewhere in the darkness, beneath a heap of fallen iron bars, came a sound, a weak, ragged breath. Rex froze. Then came a voice, hoarse and trembling. "Hey, is someone there?" The dog's ears perked up. He barked once, sharp, echoing. A boy's voice answered, "Please, help me." Rex darted inside, claws scraping against the concrete. The sound guided him. Short gasps, the rattle of metal, a whisper of fear. The smell of blood and rust grew stronger. When he found the boy, his own heart seemed to stop. The child couldn't have been more than 12. His name, though Rex did not yet know it, was Eli Carter. His clothes were torn, his face streaked with soot, and both legs were pinned beneath a collapsed section of iron railing. One of the bars pressed cruelly against his thigh. He must have been trapped for hours, maybe all night. Rex barked again, circling the boy, sniffing at the bars, then looking toward the door as if to summon help. Eli's eyes widened. "You're a dog," he breathed. "Oh, thank God. I thought I was going to die here." Rex pressed his nose against the boy's hand. It was cold, weak. He whined, pacing anxiously. He tugged at the nearest metal bar with his teeth, growling when it didn't move. He dug at the floor, scratched, pulled again, refusing to give up even as the metal scraped his gums. "Stop," Eli whispered. "You'll hurt yourself." But Rex didn't stop. Minutes passed, then an hour. The storm eased, leaving only the sound of dripping water. Eli faded in and out of consciousness, but each time he opened his eyes, the dog was still there, standing guard, silent, unblinking, as if daring the darkness to come any closer. At one point, Rex left. Eli's heart plummeted. He thought the dog had given up. But moments later, he returned, dragging something in his mouth. It was an old, frayed piece of rope, soaked and filthy. Rex dropped it beside Eli, then barked toward the door. "What are you doing?" Eli whispered weakly. Rex barked again, insistent. Then he ran toward the exit, turned, and barked once more. He wanted Eli to understand. Help is out there. Then the dog was gone. The warehouse grew quiet again, save for the boy's labored breathing. He tried to stay awake, whispering thanks to his unlikely savior. But darkness crept in again. Outside, Rex was running, limping, panting, his chest heaving as he sprinted through the rain toward the town's edge. He didn't know who would listen. He didn't know how to ask for help. But he knew one thing with every beat of his loyal heart. He would not stop until the boy was free. The rain had turned to mist by the time Rex reached the main road. Cars hissed past on wet asphalt, spraying water as they went. He barked at each one, tail low, mud splattering up his legs. None of them stopped. He ran to the first open door he found, a bakery. The warmth hit him like a wall. The woman behind the counter gasped when she saw the filthy German Shepherd dripping all over her clean tiles. "Out! Out, you mutt!" she cried, waving a towel. Rex barked frantically, spinning in circles, then ran toward her, grabbed her sleeve gently with his teeth, and tugged. He barked again, louder this time. "What's wrong with you?" she muttered, shooing him away. He hesitated only a moment before bolting back into the street. The smell of sugar and bread faded behind him. He didn't stop running. His paws hurt. His side throbbed where he'd scraped himself against the metal bars earlier, but he didn't slow down. He had to find someone who would listen. At the edge of the district stood a small garage, the kind that smelled of oil and iron, with a sign that flickered between open and "OPSO." Inside, a man in grease-stained overalls worked beneath a car, humming to the radio. Rex burst in, barking so loudly the man hit his head on the bumper. "Whoa, easy, boy!" The man slid out and blinked. "Where'd you come from?" Rex circled him, barking, whining, running to the door, back again, over and over. The mechanic, Daniel Reed, a quiet man in his 30s, frowned. "You look like you've seen a ghost." He noticed the mud, the slight limp, the intelligent eyes. This wasn't just any stray. Rex barked again, darting toward the exit. Then he turned, looked at Daniel, and barked once more, a clear, commanding sound. "Wait," Daniel said softly. "You want me to follow you?" Another bark. He hesitated. All right. Lead the way, pal." Rex didn't wait. He ran. Daniel grabbed his jacket and flashlight and jumped into his truck, following the dog through the puddled streets. It was a strange chase. A man in a beat-up pickup following a limping German shepherd who seemed to know exactly where he was going. Every few seconds, Rex would glance back to make sure the headlights were still behind him. Finally, they reached the edge of the abandoned industrial zone. Rex ran straight toward the old warehouse. Daniel parked, grabbed his flashlight, and stepped into the dark, cavernous space. The air smelled of rust and damp wood. His boots splashed in shallow puddles as he followed the dog's frantic barking deeper inside. "Hey! Anyone in here?" he called. "Help!" came a faint voice. "Over here!" Daniel froze. That wasn't his imagination. He rushed forward and saw, in the narrow beam of his light, a small boy pinned beneath twisted metal. "Holy!" Daniel dropped to his knees. "Kid, hang on. I'm here now." Eli's face was pale, eyes barely open. "The dog. He found me." Daniel glanced at Rex, who stood panting beside the boy, tail wagging weakly. "You did good, buddy," Daniel murmured, then turned to the wreckage. "Okay, let's get this off him." He tried lifting one of the bars. It didn't budge. He braced his shoulder against it and heaved until his muscles burned, but it was useless. "Too heavy," he muttered. He pulled out his phone. No signal. Of course. The warehouse walls were thick concrete and steel. Daniel looked around, eyes darting. Then he saw an old metal pipe leaning against a wall. He grabbed it, wedged it under one of the heavier bars, and pushed with all his strength. The bar shifted an inch. Eli screamed in pain. "Almost there, kid! Almost there!" Daniel shouted, pushing harder. His arms trembled, sweat mixed with the rainwater dripping from the ceiling. Rex barked wildly, as if urging him on. With one final grunt, the metal gave way, just enough for Daniel to pull Eli's legs free. The boy collapsed against the cold floor, breathing in sharp gasps. Daniel checked for injuries. "You've got some bad bruising, maybe a fracture. We'll get you to a hospital." He scooped Eli into his arms, nodding at Rex. "Come on, hero." But as they stepped outside, the ground shifted beneath them. A deep groan echoed from inside the warehouse. The weakened structure trembled. "Move!" Daniel shouted. A beam crashed down, narrowly missing them. Dust and rust filled the air. Rex barked and darted aside, but something sharp sliced across his shoulder. He stumbled but didn't fall. Daniel ran toward the truck with Eli, coughing through the haze. He laid the boy across the seat, then looked around. "Rex, come on!" The dog limped out of the dust cloud, bleeding but alive. He jumped into the back of the truck without hesitation. Daniel slammed the door and sped toward the hospital, tires skidding through the rain. In the rearview mirror, Rex stood with his paws pressed to the window, watching the warehouse disappear into the distance, the place he'd refused to abandon. Beside him, Eli stirred and whispered weakly, "You came back." Daniel glanced at the dog through the mirror, awe softening his rough features. "Yeah, kid," he murmured. "He wasn't about to let you die there." As the truck roared down the empty street, the first hint of dawn broke through the clouds. Faint, fragile light after a night of storm. Rex lay down at last, head resting on the edge of the seat, eyes closing not from exhaustion but from relief. For the first time in years, he had saved someone. And something deep inside him, something buried in grief and memory, began to stir once more. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and coffee. Machines hummed quietly, and nurses moved like ghosts through the hallways. Eli Carter lay on a narrow bed, his right leg wrapped in plaster, his small hands resting limp at his sides. The doctors said he was lucky. A few hours more under that wreckage, and he might not have made it. Daniel sat in the chair beside him, his jacket still damp from the night's storm. His gaze drifted between the boy and the window, where the rain continued to fall in soft, steady lines. Outside, in the small covered entranceway, Rex lay curled up on the concrete, his fur matted with dirt and streaked with dried blood. He refused to move, even when the security guard tried to shoo him away. "Hey, buddy, you can't stay here," the man said. Rex didn't growl or bark. He just lifted his head, eyes fixed on the glass doors that led to the ward where Eli slept. When the guard reached for him, Rex quietly lowered his head again, as if saying, "You can make me leave, but I'll come back." The guard sighed and gave up. "Fine, but just for tonight." Hours passed. The storm faded into a cold gray morning. Eli woke to find Daniel slumped in the chair, snoring softly. His throat hurt, but his first thought wasn't of the pain. It was of the dog. "The shepherd," he whispered. Daniel stirred. "You're awake. How you feeling?" "My leg hurts," Eli said honestly. Then, "Where's the dog?" Daniel hesitated. "Outside. He wouldn't leave. Can I see him?" "Not yet, kiddo. You need rest." Eli frowned. "He saved me." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, he did." After a pause, Eli asked, "Does he belong to you?" "No," Daniel said, leaning back. "I've seen him around town a few times. Never knew where he came from. Always thought he was just another stray." Eli looked toward the window. "He's not just any dog." "No," Daniel admitted softly. "He's not." That afternoon, after convincing the nurse, Daniel went outside carrying a small bowl of food and water. Rex lifted his head the moment he heard the door open. "Hey there, hero," Daniel said gently, setting the bowls down. "You must be starving." Rex sniffed the food but didn't eat. His eyes stayed fixed on the building. Daniel crouched beside him. "He's okay, you know. The boy. You saved him." The dog's ears twitched. "You can rest now," Daniel murmured, but he already knew Rex wouldn't. There was something in the animal's posture, a quiet determination that came from deeper than instinct. Loyalty, perhaps, or guilt. The mechanic studied him closer. Around Rex's neck was a faint ring of worn fur, like something had once pressed there for a long time. A collar. "Somebody loved you once," Daniel said. "Didn't they?" Rex lowered his head, tail flicking once, softly. 2 days later, Eli was sitting up in bed, sketching on a notepad someone had left for him. The lines were shaky, but the picture was unmistakable. A German shepherd, proud and alert, staring into the distance. When Daniel came in, Eli grinned. "I drew Rex." "Rex?" "Yeah," Eli said. "That's his name." Daniel chuckled. "So, that's what we're calling him, huh?" Eli nodded firmly. "It fits." The door creaked open. A nurse poked her head in. "Mr. Reed, there's a dog outside again, keeps whining. Won't leave the entrance." Daniel looked at Eli, who was already smiling. "Can he come in? Just for a minute?" the boy pleaded. The nurse hesitated. "Hospital policy says no animals." Eli's eyes widened, and Daniel raised his hand. I'll take responsibility. A few minutes later, Rex padded into the room. His fur was cleaner now. Someone must have hosed him down, and his wound had been treated, but his eyes were the same golden amber as before. Eli's face lit up. Hey, boy! Rex trotted to the bed and pressed his nose against the boy's hand. Eli laughed, a sound so full of warmth that even the nurse couldn't help but smile. Thank you, the boy whispered. You didn't leave me. Rex wagged his tail softly, then rested his head on the edge of the bed, eyes half closed. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Daniel sat in the hospital courtyard with a cup of coffee and his thoughts. A woman approached him, a nurse holding a clipboard. You're with that dog? Sort of, he said. He found the kid. She nodded. The staff can't keep him here much longer. You'll need to take him or call animal control. Daniel looked out toward the parking lot, where Rex sat quietly watching the door. Animal control's not an option. Then you'll take him, he sighed. Guess I will. When she left, Daniel took a long sip of coffee and looked up at the sky. He'd always told himself he wasn't the kind of man who needed anyone, not after losing his younger brother in a fire 5 years earlier. But something about that dog. There was history in his eyes, a familiar pain. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small rusted tag that he'd found tangled in Rex's fur earlier that day. It was so corroded it was barely legible, but he could just make out the engraving. K9 Unit. Officer Harris Daniel froze. That name. It was the same one as his brother's old friend, a firefighter who died rescuing children from a burning apartment. He looked toward the dog again, realization dawning like a slow sunrise. Rex, he whispered. You were his, weren't you? The dog looked up, ears perking slightly, as if he'd heard something familiar in the sound of his name. And for the first time, Daniel saw it. The ghost of an old collar mark around his neck, the proud but weary stance, the faint flinch at the sound of sirens. Rex wasn't just a stray. He was a soldier without a master, a rescuer without a mission. Until now. As rain began to fall again, Daniel stood, walked over, and knelt beside the dog. Guess you found another one to save, huh? He murmured. Maybe that's what you've been doing all along, keeping your promise. Rex leaned into his hand, eyes soft, tail thumping once. Somewhere inside that quiet, loyal heart, the old words of command and trust still echoed. Find them. Save them. Don't stop until they're safe. It was almost a week before Eli was discharged from the hospital. His leg was still stiff, and he moved awkwardly on crutches, but his smile had returned. The doctors called him a miracle boy. He knew who the real miracle was. Rex stayed close the whole time, waiting outside the ward, following Daniel's truck, curling up at Eli's bedside when allowed. The boy and the dog had grown inseparable in a matter of days, their bond forged in fear and gratitude. On the morning Eli was to leave, Daniel loaded the truck with the boy's few belongings. Rex jumped into the back seat before anyone could stop him. He's coming with us, Eli said firmly. Daniel chuckled. Didn't think he was asking permission. They drove through Westbridge under a bright autumn sun, a sharp contrast to the storm that had started it all. For the first time in weeks, the air smelled of fallen leaves instead of wet metal. Where are we going? Eli asked. Back home for now, Daniel said. You need rest, and this guy needs a bath. Rex whined softly. But, Daniel added after a pause, I think you're right. We should go back there, to the warehouse. Eli's eyes widened. Really? Daniel nodded. If we want to know where Rex came from, that's the place to start. They reached the old district by afternoon. The warehouse looked smaller now under the bright sky, but the damage from the storm was worse than before. Half the roof had caved in. Yellow caution tape fluttered across the entrance. Daniel parked nearby. We'll just take a quick look. Careful where you step. Rex jumped out first, tail low, ears perked. His movements changed the moment his paws touched the ground, cautious, deliberate, filled with memory. He walked ahead, sniffing the dirt, circling the same pile of debris where Eli had once been trapped. Eli hobbled after him on his crutches, eyes wide. He remembers. Yeah, Daniel said softly. Probably more than we think. Rex stopped near a rusted locker toppled against the wall. He pawed at it once, then twice, then began digging at the dirt beneath. Dust rose with each movement. What's he doing? Eli asked. Daniel knelt beside the dog. Let's see. Together, they pulled aside the dirt and debris until something small and metal clinked against the floor, an old box covered in grime and soot. Eli's breath caught. What is it? Daniel brushed it off carefully. The lock had long rusted away. Inside were a few water-damaged photographs, a folded newspaper clipping, and a leather badge with faded letters. Officer Nathan Harris, K-9 Unit. Eli looked up at Daniel. That's your friend, isn't it? Daniel nodded slowly, his throat tight. Yeah, Nate Harris. My brother's partner in the fire department. He had a dog, a German shepherd named Rex. Eli glanced at the animal now lying beside the box, head lowered, eyes distant, as if he too recognized what they'd found. Daniel picked up the newspaper clipping. The headline was barely legible, but the words still hit like a hammer. Local firefighter dies saving 2 children from apartment blaze. K-9 missing after explosion. Rex whined softly, his gaze locked on the badge. Daniel's voice broke. You were there, weren't you? You tried to save him. Eli's eyes filled with tears. He's been looking for him all this time. The 3 of them sat there in silence, surrounded by the echo of a past tragedy. Dust motes drifted through the sunlight, and for a long while no one spoke. Then Eli reached out and placed his small hand on Rex's head. It's okay, he whispered. You don't have to look anymore. Rex lifted his eyes, and in them Daniel saw something shift. The release of a burden long carried. The dog's muscles relaxed, his ears softened, and he pressed his nose gently into Eli's palm. On the drive back, the mood was quiet, but not sad. Do you think he remembers everything? Eli asked. Daniel thought for a moment. Maybe not the details, but he remembers the feelings. Dogs don't forget love, or loss. Eli looked at Rex, who was stretched out in the back seat, his head resting on the window ledge, eyes half closed. He found me, the boy said softly. Maybe he thought I was one of the kids he couldn't save before. Daniel nodded, his voice low. Maybe. Or maybe he just knew someone needed him again. They drove in silence for a while. The road wound past the forest where sunlight spilled in golden threads through the trees. Rex suddenly perked up, ears twitching. He leaned closer to Eli, licking his hand as if making a promise. Eli smiled. Don't worry, boy. You're not alone anymore. Daniel caught the moment in the mirror, the way the dog looked at the boy, protective and proud, like a guardian reborn. Guess he's found his family again, Daniel murmured. Eli looked up. Ours? Daniel smiled. Yeah, ours. That night, they sat in Daniel's small kitchen. The old house smelled of stew and motor oil. Rex lay on the rug, belly full, tail thumping lazily. Eli sat cross-legged beside him, stroking his fur. Do you think he still misses Officer Harris? Eli asked quietly. Daniel looked at the framed badge they'd cleaned and set on the table. Yeah, some losses never really leave you, but I think he's healing. Eli nodded, yawning. Me too. Before bed, Daniel went outside for air. The moonlight painted everything silver, the truck, the porch, the quiet street beyond. He looked back through the window. Eli was asleep on the couch, Rex curled protectively beside him, one paw draped gently over the boy's cast. Daniel smiled faintly. He knew, deep down, that fate had brought the two together. Not by chance, but by unfinished purpose. A dog who had lost his master had found another soul to protect. And perhaps, in saving Eli, Rex had finally saved himself too. Winter came early to Westbridge that year. Frost rimmed the windows and the streets glittered with thin ice. Daniel's small house, however, glowed with warmth, the kind that came not just from the fireplace, but from life finally finding its rhythm again. Eli had grown stronger. The cast was off, replaced by a brace and determination. Every morning before school, he'd take slow, careful steps across the living room, with Rex walking beside him, always on his left, always steady. Daniel often stood in the doorway, watching the two of them. Something about the sight never failed to move him. A man, a boy, and a dog, all three marked by loss, yet somehow healing one another. In mid-December, the town held a small ceremony at the fire station to honor the memory of fallen firefighters. Daniel hadn't been in years, but this time he decided to go, with Eli and Rex. They stood at the back of the crowd while the chief spoke. The names of those lost were read aloud, one by one. When the name Nathan Harris echoed through the cold air, Daniel felt his chest tighten. Beside him, Rex sat tall and still. His ears flicked once, and his gaze rose toward the sky, as if he understood that the name belonged to the man he'd once followed into fire. Eli reached down and touched his head. "He'd be proud of you," the boy whispered. Daniel swallowed hard. "He would," he said quietly. "You finished what he started, didn't you?" Rex didn't move, but his tail gave a single gentle thump against the frozen ground. When the ceremony ended, several firefighters came over to greet Daniel. Some recognized Rex's name from old stories, the brave K9 who had gone missing after the explosion. They knelt to pat his fur, speaking softly of things he couldn't understand, but somehow seemed to feel. For a brief moment, the years fell away, and he was back among the ones he'd once served. That evening, the three of them stopped at the edge of town. There was a park there, nothing grand, just a stretch of open field bordered by pine trees. Snow had begun to fall, soft and slow. Eli walked ahead, crutches gone now, his steps uneven but sure. Daniel followed behind with his hands in his coat pockets, smiling faintly. Rex bounded through the snow, barking once, twice, as if the cold made him young again. "Hey, boy," Eli called, laughing. "Bet you can't catch me." Rex sprinted forward, circling him, sending up sprays of white powder. The boy stumbled, fell, and laughed so hard Daniel had to look away to keep from tearing up. When Eli finally lay still, Rex flopped beside him, pressing his warm body against the boy's side. Eli threw an arm around the dog's neck and whispered, "We made it, didn't we?" The wind carried the words away, but Rex understood. His eyes softened, and he gave a small, contented sigh. As the sun set, Daniel built a small fire in a ring of stones. The orange glow flickered against the snow, painting the world in gold. They sat together in silence, man, boy, and dog, each with their own thoughts, each grateful for the other's presence. After a while, Daniel spoke. "You know, I used to think saving people was about big moments, running into fires, doing something heroic. But maybe it's smaller than that. Maybe it's staying, not leaving someone behind." Eli nodded. "Like Rex?" Daniel smiled. "Yeah, exactly like Rex." The dog looked up at them, as if hearing his name in the wind, then rested his head back on Eli's knee. That night, as they drove home, the world outside the truck window blurred with snow. The heater hummed softly, and Eli dozed in the passenger seat. Rex sat between them, eyes half closed. Daniel reached over and scratched behind his ear. "You kept your word, didn't you, old boy?" Rex leaned into the touch, his tail moving once, a slow, steady rhythm. When they reached the house, the lights from the porch spilled across the snow. Eli carried the cleaned badge of Officer Harris in his pocket, and when he placed it on the mantel beside a framed photo of him and Rex, it felt right, as if one story had ended and another had just begun. Spring returned months later. The frost melted, the air filled with birdsong, and Westbridge's gray corners bloomed with color. Eli was running again, slowly but freely this time, across the same park where they'd played in the snow. Rex chased after him, barking with joy, no limp in his step anymore. Daniel watched from a distance, leaning against his truck, the sun warm on his back. He thought of his brother, of Officer Harris, of all the moments when the world had seemed too heavy to bear. And then he looked at the boy and the dog before him, both survivors, both proof that loyalty and love could rebuild what was broken. Eli threw a stick as far as his arm would allow. "Go, Rex!" The German Shepherd ran, strong and sure, catching it midair before circling back, tail wagging proudly. When he reached the boy, he dropped the stick at his feet, eyes bright and alive. Eli crouched and hugged him tight. "You're home now," he said softly. For a moment, the world went still. Sunlight glinting on the fields, the sound of laughter rising through the air. Rex pressed his head into the boy's chest, eyes closing with peace. He didn't need words. He didn't need commands. He had done what he was born to do. He had found the one who needed saving, and refused to leave until he was free.